All right, there are a couple other videos out there, probably more than a couple other videos out there, on how to include SharePoint list item attachments on an email sent through Power Automate or Microsoft Flow. Some of the ones that are out there are a bit old and they have the older look or the older connector icons, and some of them gloss over a couple of details. So I just wanted to record a new version. It is August 12th of 2020, so if you're looking at this a year from now, things might be entirely different. But this is, as of August 12th, the way to do this, or one of the many ways to do this in Power Automate. So I'll basically start out with, I have a list here in a SharePoint site called Power Automate Workshop. It's called Lists with Attachments, where I've got two items. The first item has a single image attached. The second item has two Word docs attached. So first thing to be aware of when you're working with attachments in SharePoint using Power Automate is that the attachments field or attachments column is always going to be treated as an array or a list of things. This is because it allows you to attach multiple items. I forget the exact limit, but someone can attach one file or 10 files. So even when there is one file attached, that one attachment is still being treated as an array or a list of items. It's just a list of one. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're starting this, and it'll make things that you'll see through this process will make a little more sense. Now, when I'm building out a new flow or doing a demo of things, I like using the for selected item in SharePoint trigger. It just makes it very easy to quickly build and test a flow. Once you're sure that everything works, you can then kind of build it out using the proper trigger and copy and paste your actions over. Well, proper trigger being whichever one is most appropriate for your purposes. But to build a new flow from here using that for a selected item trigger, I'm going to click on the Automate menu, click Power Automate, and then click Create a Flow. And I'm going to scroll down the left-hand side here, click Show More, and I want to go all the way to the bottom of that list and select the Complete a Custom Action for the selected item. Again, you don't have to start this with this template. That's just how I prefer to do it. So we're going to complete a custom action for the selected item. It's going to connect to SharePoint using my institutional email. Good to go. Click Continue. And first thing I'm going to do, being a good flow practice or Power Automate practice, is give this a name. So I'll call this list, SP list item attachment to email demo 8/12/2020, just so I know when I did this. Alright, so this template or this kind of starting point gives us the for selected item trigger with the address and the list name. It also does the first important thing of getting that item. So if you've not done any other workflows or flows in Power Automate working with SharePoint items, regardless of the trigger, if you want to work with that item in SharePoint, you probably need to install or add in a get item step, because this for selected item is going to get certain information about that item, but it's not going to get all of the information we need. So get item essentially says, okay, now this was triggered when that was for that particular item. Now go and get me the data, the details, the properties of that particular item. So this just has the address, the list name, and the ID, pointing to the ID that for which was selected in that list. All right. So now, first thing I want to do here, and again, just knowing beforehand that attachments are treated as an array, if I want to add an array or use an array to attach those attachments, include those attachments on an email, I need to get them into a formal array object inside of Power Automate. So the way I'm going to do that is to create a new array variable. So I'll click New Step and initialize, and I'll select initialize variable, and I'm going to call that var attachments, and make sure that that is set as an array type variable. I'm going to leave the value blank, but again, in good practice with Power Automate, I'm going to rename this step to initialize variable dash var attachments. Even when I only initialize one variable, I still do that just because it's a good thing to do. Alright, so now we have the variable. We need to get the attachments and put them in it. So the first thing we need to do is, well, get the attachments. So I'm going to, in the choose action, search for get attachments. And you'll see that there are two SharePoint actions with get attachments in the name. There's get attachments and get attachment content. This is the next truth about SharePoint list item attachments. It's more not so specifically about SharePoint list item attachments, but files in general in Power Automate are handled as two pieces. There are two components to a file. There is the file itself, the container, and there is the content of the file. It sounds confusing, and in some circumstances it really is, but you just have to understand that there are two parts to it that you need, and you need to address both parts of it if you want things to work properly. So the first thing we're going to do is get the attachments from that list item, and again we'll just say get attachments, point it to that site and that list, and the ID will be the ID from the for selected item trigger. There we go. So that's going to get us the attachments, but then to get the attachment content, I need to actually use, again, that get attachment content action. So I'll say get attachments and select get attachment content. Now remember how I said that attachments are treated as an array? Here's how we know this for sure. So again, I'm going to select Power Automate Workshop, select the list name, again select the ID, and the file identifier is going to be from the, so that get attachments action is producing three outputs: the ID of which is the file identifier, an absolute URI, and a display name. We're going to use two of those three. Right now we're going to select file identifier because that's what it's asking for. Now when I do that, it automatically wraps that action in an apply to each loop. Again, because it's an array, because there can potentially be more than one attachment, it needs to iterate through every attachment that's there, even if it's only one, hence the apply to each loop. But that's just par for the course. So now in order to put those attachments, if there are going to be multiples, into a single array, because when I go to attach to an email, if I want to send multiple attachments on one email, I need to attach an array to the email, or basically identify the attachments as an array. So what I'm going to do is add an action here to append to that array variable. So I'll just type in append to, or just append to array variable. That's the one I want. I only have one variable to choose from, so drop that in there. And again, just good practice, I will add the variable name there. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because what we need to do is actually type in the JSON format for this array. And JSON is JavaScript object notation. I know what it's called, I know a little bit about it, but I'm by no means an expert on it. I only know what I know about this in this context by watching other people's videos. So I know what I need to do is first open with a curly brace and close with a curly brace. All good JSON is wrapped in a pair of curly braces. Within there, the structure of this array is going to be the name of the file, so quote name, close, double quote I should say, close double quote, colon, And then for the name, I want to use the display name from the get attachments action. And then a comma and a new line. And the file content is identified by the name content bytes. I'm not sure why, but it is. So we'll just type in content bytes, wrapped in double quotes, colon, and then we will use the output of the get attachment content action. So the output of this action becomes the input for the content bytes part of that JSON. There we go. So that's it. That gives us essentially for every attachment that's on a list item, it'll cycle through and append the name and the content to that array called var attachments. All right, so now we have our attachment content in an array. We want to attach it to an email. This is where some of the other demos that I've seen of this, everyone always jumps right to the Outlook connector or the Outlook send email. So when you type in send email, you'll see there are a number of different ways to send an email. I have long been a fan of the send an email notification action, which uses a Surface account to send through SendGrid. It's a good sort of non-personal way to send an email. The downside is that it sends the email from Microsoft Power Apps and Power Automate, which can be a little confusing and potentially confusing to end users who think it's spam. And in this context, one of the problems with using this connector is that when I show the advanced options and try to add an attachment, I can't add my array there because essentially this only allows a single attachment. There is no way to add multiple attachments because the attachments are always just being considered as the content of the file and the name of the file. So in this sense, or in this situation, this, as much as I like this email action, this isn't going to work for me. So I'm going to delete that. Let's try some of the others. So send me an email notification isn't really going to work because it's only going to send it to me, and I want this to actually send to whoever created the item. And all of the others here are, most of the others are Outlook ones. There's also an SMTP one. If you have access to an SMTP account, maybe that would work. I don't know if that handles attachments any differently. Doesn't look like it does at all, so let's delete that. So the next best thing in my mind to the send an email notification using the mail connector is sending from a shared mailbox. Now, shared mailboxes don't consume an Office 365 license, so your email admins will probably be more than happy to give you a shared mailbox to use for building your flows. Whether you want to use one for all of your flows or different ones for different flows for different purposes or different departments, different clients, etc. But sending from a shared mailbox is pretty straightforward using this action. You do want to make sure that when you ask for that mailbox that you make sure that they give you send as permission. Send on behalf of will also work, but the from address comes out a little weird, so I like getting the send as permission. So I'll select send an email from a shared mailbox. I happen to have a shared mailbox called SPO test mailbox, so that's what I'm going to send it to. Or send it from rather. That's the mailbox I'll be using to send it, and I want to send it to the created by email, so essentially the email of the person who created the item that I'm getting and sending the attachments for, and say here are your attachments. Why you would send the attachments back to the person, I don't know, but this is just an example, just a demo. Don't get too concerned about that. So in here I'll just say hello and add in the display name of the person, so created by display name. Here are the files you attached in Sharepoint. Alright, so that's good. Now I need to actually add the attachments. Now when we first expand the advanced options there, we'll see that I still have attachment name and attachment content. So how do I actually add that array variable? Well, what's a little confusing or a little misleading here is that this is already being treated as an array. So because Outlook treats attachments as an array, this input is also an array, but in this item, or in this sense, because we have this add new item that indicates that this allows multiples, but we need to get it into a format that we can put that array variable. So we need to click this little button here. I don't know what they call this. Apparently the tooltip says switch to input entire array. So I'll select that, and it gives us a single field. And then when I select that, it'll say, oh, hey, there, I can put my attachments array variable in there. The importance, if you don't specify a value, it will send as low importance. So this is kind of important. I always, no pun intended, I always set that to normal unless it is a really important email, in which case I will use the high option, but normal is usual or normal. And then I'm just going to save this. And we'll do a quick test. So I'm going to go back over to my list. I'm going to select that first item and click on the automate menu. That's the demo I did earlier. This is the one we just built, literally live right here and now. So I'll select that. And the first time I run this, it's going to say, hey, do you want to allow this? And I'll click continue and then run that flow. So now if I open up my Outlook email, momentarily I should be getting a new email attachment. There we go. Here are your attachments. In this case, it's an image, so boom, it's right there. Incidentally, I'm going to try it with the other item here, just to prove that it does work with multiple attachments. And again, I need to run that flow. We'll give it a moment or two to process, and then go back over to my email, refresh, and there we go. Now, if your organization is using Safe Links, ATB, I forget what it's called now, but basically your attachments may need to be scanned, so you may not see them right away, but they are there. Trust me, they will eventually show up. So that's it. That's how you send email attachments from using Power Automate, using a SharePoint list and sending those attachments. All right. Hope this was helpful. If not, let me know. If you have any questions, feel free to add those in the comments below.